Hello, hello. Welcome to the 17th International Book Fair of Thessaloniki. I'm very happy to be here and talk to you. We are here to talk about your novel, The Man Who Came Uptown. Patakis Editions, very good translation by Antonis Kalokiris. But I am tempted to ask you first about the United States presidential election, if you are happy with the result, if you are worried with something.
No, I'm happy with the result. We won, and it'll all be okay. You know, it's all going to work itself out. Democracy will prevail.
Okay, that's a good thing to think about. So I'll make a short introduction in Greek. Ο George Pelecanos είναι εγγονός Ελλήνων μεταναστών από τη Σπάρτη και εξελίχθηκε σε έναν συστηματικό πολέμιο του ταξικού και του φιλετικού ρατσισμού. Αναδείχθηκε ως ο χρονικογράφος της Ουάσιγκτον και εδώ και 28 χρόνια από την πρώτη του εμφάνιση στα αμερικανικά γράμματα, ήταν 35άρης τότε, και με τα μυθιστορήματά του που διαδραματίζονται πίσω από την καλογιαλισμένη βιτρίνα της Ουάσιγκτον και με τις δημοφιλείς τηλεοπτικές σειρές που εμπνέει ως σεναριογράφος αλλά και ως παραγωγός, είναι γνωστό, το βλέπουμε στην Ελλάδα, το The Wire, και με την προσωπική του ζωή όμως, γιατί με τη γυναίκα του έχουν υιοθετήσει 2 αγόρια από την αφροαμερικανική κοινότητα και ένα κορίτσι από τη Γουατεμάλα, ο George Pelecanos αγωνίζεται να καταδείξει και να θεραπεύσει την τοξική δυναμική των φιλετικών και των ταξικών αντιθέσεων, το racial divide που λέει, που γεννούν την εγκληματικότητα. Σε ένα βιβλίο του, το The Night Gardener, ο κυπουρός της νύχτας, λέει «Poverty is violence». Ο Πελεκάνος είναι ίσως ο μεγαλύτερος εν ζωή συγγραφέας αστυνομικών ιστοριών. Το λέει ένας πολύ μεγάλος, ο Στίβεν Κίνγκ. So, George Pelecanos, you were 11 years old when you heard Martin Luther King's speech in Washington. 4 days later, he was assassinated. Half a century after that, black people still get killed in the US. So what's happening with democracy in the US? In your novel, we see a sort of rise of a new Ku Klux Klan. Somebody says that in the novel. And do you think that the Black Lives Matter movement will help to change things?
Sure. You mentioned the assassination of Dr. King, and it was right after his assassination, in fact, that night, that the riots started in Washington, D.C. and around the country. But I remember the riots very clearly. My papu had a diner right in the middle of the riots, and so part of our family was very concerned about it. But looking back on it with perspective, the riots, even though there was a lot of damage and burning and looting and that sort of thing, it's my opinion, and it is sort of a controversial opinion, that sometimes riots are necessary, because if you look at the history of that era, America had basically been in a position where they sympathized with the blacks, and they were on the right side of the civil rights movement, but they weren't really doing anything about it. And it was a stagnant movement. And what happened was that when the riots happened, America sat up and took notice. They got scared. And the civil rights movement accelerated by about 10 years in that one weekend. So if you come to the present now and you look at what's happening here, people today are also not happy with some of the violent and nonviolent protesting in the cities, but it's made Americans take notice and realize that something has to change, something has to happen again, or we're going to descend into more serious division and more serious violence. So these things work, you know, as much as people don't want to admit it, they work.
Yes, I agree. So let's come to your novel now, The Man Who Came Uptown. Tell us, who is the man who came uptown? Without spoiling the thrill.
No, it's the term uptown is slang here, and what it means is when you're incarcerated and you get out, they say you're going uptown, and it doesn't mean that, you know, uptown connotes like a luxurious living and wealth and all that. It doesn't mean that. It just means you're going home, and it means you're going to a better place than you've been.
So this is Michael Hudson, your protagonist.
Yes, and while he's locked up awaiting trial, he gets turned on to books by the jail librarian. And like a lot of guys in lockup, he had never really read books before because it didn't interest him. It wasn't part of his life. He had, you know, not much of an education. But when you're locked up and you're looking for something to do, a lot of people turn to books, and many get turned on to reading in a big way for the first time in their life. So when he gets out, all he really wants to do is go home to his mother's house, get a job, which he does, and get a library card, which he also does. And he wants to live a peaceful life. And he can't, because a private detective has gotten him out by subverting the trial process, and now being a witness. And now Michael Hudson has to do a favor for this guy, which is criminal in nature. And that's the central conflict of the novel. Will he go back to his own life, or will he proceed, move forward, and just lead a sort of a simple, peaceful life, reading books and going to work every day?
You yourself have worked in juvenile facilities, and I think that you were doing the same job as Anna, your second protagonist, the librarian in prison. Do you want to tell us about this experience of yours?
I started out going to juvenile facilities where they incarcerate basically kids, you know, people in their teens. And I was doing reading programs with them through the Penn Faulkner Foundation, and it was part of their program. And then I got sort of branched out, and I started going to adult prisons and jails and doing reading programs and writing programs with the individuals who were incarcerated. And I met at the DC jail, which is a holding facility like Rikers Island in New York. I met a librarian there named Danielle. And I got really interested in her because if you look at my body of work, there's always somebody in my books who is doing good out there in the community and trying to make change with people at their own personal expense, meaning they could probably be working in a better job, a higher paying job, but they're out there, they've sacrificed to do this. And I really admire those people, as well as people who go to work every day. You know, I just think it's a heroic.
You are talking about people who give a second chance to other people who are in a very difficult position.
Yes.
There's always that in your novels, the second chance.
And it can be a teacher, it can be a volunteer, it can be anybody, but in this case it was this librarian, because I saw what she was doing, and she was really impacting people's lives, genuinely. So I wanted to, that's enough for me to write a book, and that was the impetus of it. And I constructed a situation where Michael Hudson sort of falls in love with her in a way, not a physical love, but he loves her because of what she's done for him. And when he gets out, because DC is sort of a small town, and people don't realize that, but as far as cities go in America, it's a small town, you know, on a scale. And he runs into her. It turns out she lives in the adjoining neighborhood to where his mother lives. So they begin a relationship. And again, it's not a romantic or physical relationship, but it is a relationship based on love. And he helps her out, and she helps him out as well.
Okay. So, but tell us also about your other protagonists, because the relation that Michael and Anna have, it's one thing, and then it's this private investigator who tries to put him in a difficult situation, but for a good reason, he says. This is very interesting. And then there is a cop, retired one, who is a bit violent. And then there are these white-collar people who are surrounding them. Tell us a bit about the rest of your protagonists.
Well, I over the years, I've befriended a lot of ex-cops, and some of whom became bail bondsmen here, and also private detectives, and some of these guys do side jobs where they go into, you'd be surprised how many, for example, how many kidnappings there are in the city. Like, you have two sides are beefing about something, they're arguing about something, and they'll take somebody's wife and they'll hold her hostage. And this kind of stuff never makes the newspapers. It doesn't get reported to the police. And these detectives and ex-cops who are now working sort of security jobs, they go in there and they rescue people, and they mediate these things. But a couple of them that I've gotten to know that were honest with me have sort of blurred that line and started doing illegal things themselves. They said, well, you know, there's this guy who's, let's say there's somebody who's a pimp or a drug dealer. You know, that money was ill-gotten, and I'm going to get some of it myself, and they'll go in there and rob somebody. So these are based on actual people that I've met. And then one of the things that Ornasian, who's Armenian, the detective, I didn't make him Greek this time, I made him Armenian.
But he's Orthodox. He's Orthodox as the Greeks are, yeah.
My private detective friend told me about a case where he was hired by these parents to find out what happened at a wild party at their house. These people had money, and they were away for the weekend, and their daughter threw a party, and the daughter got raped by people who showed up at the party that she didn't know. And there was a lot of drugs and drinking and that kind of thing, as you can imagine. And the parents were more concerned with keeping it away from the authorities than they were. They just wanted to find out who destroyed their property. They didn't want to find out who raped their daughter. And my friend, the private detective, was sort of outraged by this, and he was telling me this story. And again, I hear stuff like that, and it makes me want to write about it. And it also took me into that world of white supremacy, because I made the guys who come to the party, you know, white supremacists, and they're rampant around here. Believe it or not, within 50 miles of Washington, D.C., there's all kinds of clan cells and people like that who are holed up and doing stuff on the internet and that kind of thing. So it's real.
Yes, and you are talking also about gentrification of certain areas in Washington that has changed the social image or situation there. And this is interesting because we have seen the riots for Trump now, and it was really a bit violent. It seemed violent.
Well, yeah, I mean, people were clashing, and the police did a good job of keeping order. The local police, not so much the people that were brought in by Trump actually created more violence. There's a kid on my block. He's not a kid. He's in his mid-20s. He's a medical student at Georgetown University, and he went down there to help people because he's been working in hospitals and he knows how to treat people. He went down there and he had his medical kit and everything, and he was helping somebody who had been who was tear gassed, pepper sprayed, and they were on the ground, and he was picking them up. And they shot him with rubber bullets, these guys who Trump brought in. And I saw he took his shirt off and showed me. He had welts all over his body from the rubber bullets. Rubber bullets, if they hit you in the eye or something like that, they'll take your eye out. They're just as lethal. It's a projectile. So, the local police did a pretty good job, but the people that the feds brought in did a very poor job, and they incited more violence.
So let's return to the novel. I think that reading your novel, one could create a library. You are so generous with your other authors, so generous. You're presenting them. You're presenting the way they write. I think that your novel should be taught in I don't know, in literary criticism classes or in university. How is it? Your novel is dedicated to Elmore Leonard, and sorry,
Charles Willeford.
And yes, and Charles Willeford. Do you want to tell us about them? Why these two writers?
Well, they're first of all, I love books, obviously, and
yes,
and the book and this novel is sort of a love letter to reading books,
yes.
Which I think the pandemic has showed us that books are going to be around forever. If you remember a few years ago, everybody was talking about the death of novels and books.
Of course.
E-books were going to take over. People weren't going to read books anymore. That's not the case. I think people are reading now more than ever, and a lot of people have fallen in love with reading again.
Yes, and with the book as an object.
Yeah, there's no substitute for holding a book in your hand. I consider the book itself. The book itself, I consider it a work of art. It's an object of art. A Kindle or an e-reader is not. It's just a machine. So, I wanted to talk about that, what books mean to people. And some of these writers, Elmore Leonard was a big influence on me. I got to be friendly with him before he died, and he was a gentleman. He's a good guy. Charles Willeford, a lot of people aren't going to get this illusion, but the last line of the novel, of my novel, echoes the last line of his novel, Pickup, yes. in which the protagonist's race is not revealed until the end of the novel. And a lot of people haven't picked up on this, but nobody in this book, in The Man Who Came Uptown, is identified by race. There's never a point where
you never do it. You never do it. The reader understands, but through another
Exactly.
other ways.
I hope they understand. I mean, it was a concern of mine to do this, but I thought it was time to do it. You know, it's always bothered me that when I read a book by a white writer and they say, and then I met a black man standing on the corner, right?
Yes.
But if the man on the corner is white, they don't say white man. They only identify the race if they're black or Hispanic or, and it bothered me. And by the way, you know, black writers do it too. It's a natural thing to do because it's the other, right? It's the other. It's the other.
Yes. But
Just,
here you have Latinos too. You never,
yeah.
You don't describe them Latinos, okay? It's like that. It's very important the way that you do it.
I tried it. You know, I tried it. I don't know if it works or not, and I hope to keep doing it. You have to work a little bit harder, but then you don't come with any preconceived notions of who the characters are, and which we all bring that baggage to the reading experience when we read a book. And the people are immediately identified as black or white or Hispanic. You bring these preconceived ideas about those characters,
Of course.
and I didn't want that to get in the way of the story. So anyway, I tried it.
Yes, and I think that you did you worked in the same way when you had Greek American detectives and cops and protagonists in your books. You have in many of your books there are Greek Americans, but they are not always the good guy. They are not idealized. They are not the people we have seen in I don't know, in Nia Vardalos marriage, Greek marriage, γάμος αλλά ελληνικά. They are. What did you want to do with these Greek American protagonists of yours? I'm talking about Spiro Loukas. I'm talking about Nick Stefanos.
Right. I mean, look, from the very beginning, my intention was to humanize us, and which means all facets of a character, including the negative ones. You're right. It's been in America, the Greeks tend to be romanticized by Greek Americans.
Yes.
And that means that they're put up on a different level than others. And you know, I love Greeks too. I love being Greek American and everything. But if you do that, there's no complexity there, and it separates us in a bad way, in a way that's not true, that's not honest. You know, so I just want to tell the truth, and it's not. I don't deliberately try to. I won't make a Greek character have negative traits just to have them, but I will do it if it's appropriate for that character. And I think it's better for us in the long run. And you're trying to make, you know, you're trying to hopefully you leave some kind of legacy with your work. And I think it's better for the work. It's more complex and it's more true.
And you do the same thing with your scenarios in The Wire. For example, the Greeks in your TV series, the TV shows are the people who run the nightlife in Baltimore. I mean, they're not the best of the best good people. I mean, it's very courageous. I think.
Well, it's funny because when I was on The Wire, the very first season, and David Simon, he wanted to hire me to come back on full time second season, and I wasn't sure that I was going to do it. And he said, "Come on, man, I need you. Like, we're going to have a bunch of Greeks in this." And so I did it. And there's people speaking Greek in the show and all this. So as you mentioned, some of them are bad guys. But at the end, if you remember, the guy who they call the Greek says to somebody, "I'm not even Greek." You know, like Simon, Simon kind of tricked me into working on the show by making these guys Greek. But yeah, yeah, that was a good season.
Okay. How do you work when you write scenarios? Do you work as if you were writing a short story, or it's totally different from the way you are working when you're writing fiction, a novel?
The screenplays are, yes, they're different. Obviously, it is collaborative. So you have a writer's room who critiques your work and everything, which honestly, I don't really like it, but it's necessary. As a novelist, I control everything. I control my work and the finished product and everything. So, but it's something I had to get used to. But it also, I realized early on when I started writing screenplays that if I was to get as much control as possible over my screenplays and over what they became when they hit the screen, the finished product, I would have to become a producer and a showrunner.
Okay, yes.
That was my goal, because I didn't like handing over a script and watching it get changed so much. And I wanted to control the process, just like I do in novels. But I will say that it's a myth that screenwriting is somehow easier than writing a novel. In many ways, it's more difficult because you have to convey the same amount of information and emotion strictly through dialogue and action, rather than prose, in which you can impart all kinds of information through backstory and getting into it. You can just say what a character's thinking. You can't do that in a script, because you can't go into somebody's head. So in a way, it's a different kind of writing, but it's just as hard, and I take it just as seriously. I've come across novelists who we've hired actually on shows, who've come in thinking that this is going to be easy and much easier than writing a book, and they've said so, and they haven't done very well, because they didn't take it as seriously as they do their books. And you have to. You sweat as much blood writing a script as you do writing a novel.
Okay. Daniel Mendelsohn, the critic and writer, he says that these series, this show in HBO, should be a school for new novelists, for young novelists, for fiction in the future. He says that it is very important what is being done there. I mean, maybe not everything, but that it has changed the way the novelists themselves see the way they are writing and their approach.
I think it's opened the door for a new kind of writing in screenwriting. It's much different than it used to be. I used to look at scripts when I was starting out, and Hollywood scripts and network television, and there was a lot of white space. There would be one line of action, and then dialogue, and then another one line of action or a word. And if you look at my scripts, they're written very much the way novels are written. It's long paragraphs of description.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that I've been able to do that is because I never worked on a network show. I wasn't working in Hollywood. All this stuff was off the grid. We were sort of this renegade group of guys that were sort of breaking the rules, and nobody was watching us.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get any bad habits, and we write differently. We also hire people who are not traditional screenwriters.
Okay.
I'll go after people who, I'll read a book, I'll read a novel, and I'll say, well, this woman or this man could be a good screenwriter because their dialogue and their description and that kind of thing. And I don't care if they've never written a script before, because that can be taught. That's a format that you learn. I'm looking for good writers.
Yes, that's interesting what you say. Yes, which one of your novels, not which one, which novels do you prefer, or do you consider that were most important for you and for your job as you were getting more, you had more experience as a writer, as a novelist?
Well, there's one book that I go back to is Hard Revolution, which you mentioned in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And it was
where Nick
very
Stefanos is a protagonist there, isn't it? Nick Stefanos.
No. No, it's a Derek Strange novel.
Okay.
But
Yes.
the kid in the beginning who walks out of Saint Sophia, Greek Orthodox Cathedral, which is my church, where my mother taught Sunday school for 25 years, was me. And that was me that crossed the street and to the National Cathedral and heard Dr. King speak. It's a very personal book for me, but it's also an important book about what we discuss, which is how revolution can change society. And another big book for me was The Night Gardener, which I think you also mentioned. That sort of changed my career in the sense that it put me on the bestseller list, the New York Times, and it got me to another level. But there was a lot of, books like King Suckerman, things like that, did a lot for me in that they kind of got me big overseas, or they gained a bigger readership overseas. Much more, relatively speaking, a much bigger readership than I had in the United States. And it bounced back across the Atlantic, and journalists were looking at what they were writing about me in Europe, and they were saying, who is this guy? We don't even know who he is. So it helped me, some of those early books helped me, help my career in the United States actually by making an imprint in Europe. And that was in Greece, and it was in places like France and England, which has been very, very helpful for me.
Yes, I will talk about these books and say the Greek titles. The first you were talking about, A Firing Offense, it's Φλεγόμενη πόλη, εκδόσεις Οξύ. And then there are other of your the novels that we can find in Greece and in Greek is Ο Βασιλιάς του Πεζοδρομίου, Δίλημμα Δικαίου, Ο Κυπουρός της Νύχτας, Το Αδιέξοδο, Η Προμήθεια, Το Δίδυμο, and now ο άντρας που επέστρεψε από τις εκδόσεις Πατάκη.
What does that mean?
I was saying, I was talking about the titles of your novels in Greek.
I know. I mean, the last one. What's the translation for the last one?
Ο άντρας που επέστρεψε is the man who came back.
Returned?
Who returned, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah, all that stuff gets run by me. They ask me, what do you think? And sometimes I don't like it. Sometimes I do. The Man Who Returned is pretty good.
Yes. No, Andonis Kalokiris is a very, very good translator. I would like to read this small passage in the Greek edition. Is page 71, where Michael thinks about the transformative power of books, and I like it very much. When he read a book, it's page 71 in the novel. Okay. When he read a book, The door to his cell was open. He could step right through it. He could walk those hills under the big blue sky, breathe the fresh air around him, see the shadows moving over trees. When he read a book, he was not locked up. He was free. It's very important, and we need to keep it in mind, because we love books, and we are in the Thessaloniki International Book Fair, and it would be nice if we had you in person, but this will come maybe one of the next years. Tell me, what is it that you are interested in when you hear about Greece?
Well, I keep up with the politics. I read as much as I can, and I'm interested in the changes. You mentioned gentrification, and whenever I come back to Greece, when you're not there for a while, you really notice the changes. So when I come back, it's always much more advanced, the people were, when I came when I was a kid, there was still the Chorios and the people in the Kapinios that it was old Greece in a way in the 60s and 70s when I was a child, and now it's modern Greece. It's like everywhere. It's much more like everywhere you go. You know what I mean? And that's true of any place. What we've lost and what we've lost here in Washington. It's very nice here in Washington. The crime is down. The amenities are nicer. The livings, quarters are nicer. But we lost a lot of the character, because when I was a kid, the city was 75–80% black. It was a black city with a lot of soul, man. I mean, that's what got me interested in writing about Washington. It was a very cool place for somebody like me to grow up. And so it's nicer now, but it's lost a lot of its character. And I see that all over the world. Now, I'm not saying that in Greece has lost its character, but it is a different Greece, and that interests me. That's the main thing that interests me, is those changes and how they affect society. And just an example is, you couldn't even, when I went to Greece when I was a teenager and I met one of my cousins, she couldn't get Rolling Stone magazine or things like that until 6 months after they were published here in the United States. And now it's, for anybody in Greece or anywhere, it's instant. You get on the laptop and you get all the same information that I get.
Yes, and many times we are more informed than you, because we have a wide range of interests. Yeah.
It's been revolutionary, but I'm not sure that it's great. I'm really concerned with social media, that the downside of social media is that people get a lot of information, too much information, and a lot of it is wrong. It's misinformed. Sometimes it's outright lies, and you can't tell the difference. And there are few places to get news anymore that is just news, where somebody is either writing the facts or reading the facts to a TV monitor. It's always tinged by, it's always affected by bias on both sides, the left and the right. It's hard to find unbiased information anymore, and that's been the downside of this internet revolution, is that. And that's part of the reason that there's been so much violence here in the United States, is people get on their laptop, they'll get on Facebook, and they'll see something that's just, it's a lie, but they believe it because they're so used to reading these lies every day. And then they get angry and then they go out in the street. That's not a good thing. I got off topic a little bit, but it does, I know that this is true in Greece also, is that this is not a positive thing to have all this misinformation hitting people all the time. It's not a good thing.
Yes, in Greece it's happens very often. But you're talking about violence, and I think you are dealing with violence from everywhere it comes, not only from the violent people or the bad people in your novels. And this is, I think, a very big issue nowadays, violence.
Yeah.
In the United States, it seems that it has risen. I don't know. This is what we feel about it. But
as far as the police go, you know, I come at it from a little bit of a different perspective than most white people in this country, because I raised 2 black sons and a Latina daughter, you know, and my children are all grown now. They're in their 20s and almost 30 years old. So I don't, you know, it's different now, but when they were growing up, I had to worry about them every time they left the house. And I had to, and most of my worry was not from them getting in trouble with other kids or violence from other kids. It was from the police. Mm. And this is a real thing. It's not something that's made up. It's not anti-police. I'm not against the police. I want the police to protect us. And this movement to defund the police is entirely wrong. You don't want to defund the police. The police need more money for training, better salaries that attract more educated people. And, you know, we want police to protect us.
Yes, but not kill you. I mean, all this George Floyd thing and everything. It was hard.
It's been going on forever. It's just coming to light. And actually, I'm working on a show right now. We're writing it for HBO about the police in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And because they had a squad of police that were bad, you know, dirty cops, and they all got sent up to prison. But they were doing things like, they were robbing drug dealers, they were doing home invasions, they were selling drugs on the street, but also what they were doing was they were trampling on the rights of citizens. They were planting evidence, arresting people for no reason, and we're going to write about that, and we're going to shoot it next year, and we're going to try and answer the question of, instead of just saying this is bad, we're going to try to answer the question of why it happens. Why? Yeah, that's the big thing, and it's what we've always done. It's what we did on The Wire too. You know, if you watch The Wire, season 4 was about the kids, and you followed these kids through their school year. Well, you know, I've been hearing all my life, why can't black kids get out of the ghetto? Why can't they just work hard like we did? You know what I mean? We showed why. We answered the why.
Do you believe that this movement, Black Lives Matter, can help to this?
Yes, I do.
In what way?
It makes people aware. It started a lot of arguments. Some of the arguments have gotten violent. But again, you need this sort of the violence is sometimes necessary to get us to a place where we can eventually reconcile and go forward. It's happened before. It happened in the late 60s. And the 70s was a very peaceful time in this country in a lot of ways, where people decided, all right, we're going to try to do better. And I think that's going to happen after this. We've got a new president. He's not left wing. He's a moderate. He wants to be the president for all Americans. He doesn't want to divide us. And And I think things are going to be better. After January 20th, you're going to see things calm down here.
We hope. We hope.
I do hope. I'm an optimist.
Yes.
Look, I couldn't get out of bed in the morning if I didn't have hope. You know what I mean?
And your children, do they have a sort of a Greek culture or any connection with Greece, or not anymore? I mean, in the third generation, you have lost the connection with Greek culture or Greek.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a natural drop off there, but I raised my kids at St. Sophia, and my sons, like I did, they played basketball for the church, which is what, it's a brilliant thing. The Goya, Greek Orthodox Youth of America, this basketball program keeps boys in the church when they're teenagers. Otherwise, we'd never go to church. And my sons played basketball. They made a lot of lifelong friends like I did. I'm still friends with the guys that I grew up with in the church, and they will be too. So that's, they're not Greek, but they feel like they feel like they have Greek in them. My oldest son speaks Greek, and it's been good. The idea is, this is how it worked for me, and I think it's how it's going to work for my children. Is my parents are gone; they're deceased. But when I go to church and I see their friends and the children of their friends and so on, I'm with my parents again, and it's good to be part of a larger community. I'm not talking about God now. I'm talking about community.
About the social community. Yes.
Yeah, because we never, in America, we didn't have really. There was very few Greek towns. Greeks lived together. Yeah. One. So the church became that place where you community once a week and made lifelong relationships. It's very important.
Yes, I cannot hear you very well now. I think that there has been a bit, I don't know.
Sorry.
Yes, okay. Something happened in the wire. Have you read any Greek novel? I mean, any novels translated in English by Greek writers? Do you know any one of them, of the new generation, maybe?
Yeah, I'm looking right now, because there was a Greek guy that sent me a book that was pretty good.
Okay.
Hold on one second. I got it right here. Makis Tsitas. God is my witness.
Yes, Makis Tsitas.
Yeah, you know it?
Yes.
It's pretty good.
Yes.
I liked it.
He has, okay. It's difficult for a Greek writer to be translated in the Anglo-Saxon market is very difficult for Greeks. It's rather closed. While Greeks get translated easier in Spanish or in Italian or in German or in French, less in
yeah, we don't get a lot of Greek novels here, unless you're Kazantzakis,
Yeah.
But who's still in print, but
there are some.
It's not a
yeah, there are some Greek writers who have been lately translated. It's Sofia Nikolaidou, Christos Ikonomou, Christos Chrysopoulos, the younger generation, and they are strong. And Makis Tsitas, you know him. So we will.
We corresponded.
Yes, we must.
I mean, I hope. Look, man, it's a global. That's the good thing about the internet, is that you could put a book out here,
Okay.
and it can get translated right on your laptop. Now, the translation isn't going to be great, but at least you can read it, you know?
Yes, okay. You know, when you have seen, when you like fiction, you need a good translation because it keeps...
I agree.
You are very well translated in Greece, and this changes things for the readers. We feel closer to you. I think we have come to the end of our discussion. I don't know if you want to send a message to your Greek readers, and then we can say goodbye to the next.
Well, first, thank you for your, you did great. I appreciate you. And,
you are great, and you make things easier.
Thanks. No, my message is peace. That's it. That's how I want to sign out. Peace.
Okay. Okay. We thank you very much, and
Thank you.
hope to see you in person next time.
Me too.
Yes.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.